All right, just a quick sort of follow-up to that sort of RIO sort of analysis I did back at the start of May. So basically, we were coming into this little resistance area here around that sort of point, and we obviously sort of got that big sort of spike up here. But if nothing else, it just really sort of confirmed this sort of falling resistance, which is sort of covered in that analysis as well, which is really, if you want to see sort of a lot more of a topside moves than that, this is the mentality, and that's what I was saying that you got to overcome this because even though, I mean, look, even in sort of downtrends, so not that's necessary, it's more just obviously sideways. But at this point, you can see that while the buyers are trying to hold these solid straight lines, the sellers are accepting a little bit less each time, each time, each time. This is represented by this falling resistance. And this is the mentality that it's got to sort of basically see change. So look, the move basically was the idea to sort of come back and test these levels around this sort of 105, 102. This is where the buyers have been previously. If we look back sort of back to sort of May of 2023, you could tell that this is a strong sort of support. This is on a weekly time frame at the moment. Buyers obviously sort of allowed it to sort of get a little bit lower than it had previously, but pretty much, as you can tell, in ballpark. And we've seen a big sort of pushback with it all. So look, it is playing to the chart exactly as kind of sort of thought. Obviously, I thought it would come down here a little bit quicker, but a little bit of a spike up and then it's pulled back here. I think it's about 20% or 25, no, maybe not 25% from what's that, from 121, around 17% from the highs just there down to the low. So 17% pullback. And the buyers have sort of stepped in here pretty much on cue. So look, it's running the plan. This is what we sort of thought to get a bit of a bounce from around this area. So this is technically the kind of leg that we're in at the moment, which obviously this is just more a sort of rough guide of direction of sort of where we sort of should be going. What you want to sort of see now is obviously sort of moving back up. You want to see this move sort of sustained, moving up along over here. And then really, once you're sort of getting back up to this 116 level, this is again going to be the time to sort of see what the seller's going to do because they were trying to hold this, hold this, hold this, hold this, hold this. Obviously here, bang, they let it go. Should they get back up here, all these people that were trying to sort of buy and sort of, in this kind of zone over here, they're going to be like, well, you know what, we do have this sort of falling resistance coming here. We tried to buy it here because we thought this was going to be the breakout. Unless they've sort of averaged out and sort of bought some more down here, most likely people have got the chance to sort of get out of this trade and get out for even. That's going to add to your sell pressure, which is going to be sort of moving back down. So that's what you really got to overcome. I think once this falling resistance goes, well, you can look back up to the 135s. Like there's no reason why you can't go back up to test those highs. And this can be really just a sort of a large consolidation period, albeit a couple of year consolidation, but that is what it is. If we go onto the lower time frame, you can see that it really sort of actually sort of, I mean, apart from it melted down through this area here, it did sort of find some pretty good support and actually sort of put this little channel in just the other day. And as you can see, it's tested out the top side here, dribbled around here, and I said, I put a post up and I said, sort of like above 106, you're going to see this thing move. And it opened on 106 today and it's just sort of taken off. So I think it's about sort of 4% or so just for the day. So obviously, compared to what it's seen recently and that, there's a big explosion of power sort of coming up over here. So, it's got room to move with the RSI. So, it's not to sort of say that it can't sort of continue a little bit more, maybe some little backs and forth of that. But in theory, you'd probably see this thing move up. And I think we're going to see an interesting sort of thing here. Either a test of this horizontal around this sort of 116 area, probably not so likely, but in the sense of like where the chart is, that is the kind of area that you're kind of looking for. But the big cautious for the downside, I think, is the idea of the sellers to excuse me, start to go off on a tangent and push this down a little bit harder. Look, you've got ASX as a whole at near record highs. I think that'll be a good indicator is to if that starts to come off, maybe the sellers start to step in here a little bit early because you got to sort of think, even in these other sort of downtrend periods here, I suppose we had some pretty negative sort of periods through here, but these things sort of like sold down, stabilized, sold down, stabilized. This thing, I guess you could say it maybe stabilized a little bit here, but not really. It's just pretty much just a straight sell down here. So the reason I mention this is to sort of be on the more cautious side of this just being a little bounce to then potentially come back down a bit lower. Because even though ASX was sort of running at its all-time highs, this thing was still being sold down, which makes me sort of think that sort of like this is more just like a little dead cat bounce or whatever it's called, whatever the term is, dead cat bounce. Whereas you could see the sellers push back in and re-attack this level here. So from here, a sort of area that I'd sort of be interested in is to see what would happen should the price come back here and test here again. I think this is definitely a bounce. I'm not saying that this is finished, this bounce here. This could come up to, so back up to maybe 110, 112, these kind of areas here. But should they sort of break the pattern, which is basically sort of sell it down prior to getting to this 116 area, and they start to attack this 100 area again before touching up 116, I would be cautious because it could seem like the sellers are picking up the pace and more leading to this sort of move to the downside here. And as I said, sort of even with ASX pushing to the top, they were still selling this down. So if the broad sentiment in the market is that, hey, let's all push things up, yet they're still selling this down, what happens when the sentiment turns and everybody's saying, hey, let's sell everything down there as well? Anyway, not saying that's going to necessarily happen, but it is something to sort of keep in the back of the mind, and that this could just be a little bit of a push up here and then a run down over here. So from here, I think certainly, I mean, you've got to respect the fact that this is a big solid day. This is like 4% or so on the day. If this moves up and doesn't sort of, if this fails to sort of, hit this 116 area and hits back at these lows, so, 103, 102, 103, before hitting 116, I think there's a good chance that we see this mentality shift and this could be pushing down here. And underneath this 100 area, there's a lot of sort of free air. Like it zoomed up through this area here. And as we know, sort of like, generally when things go quickly through, there's a good chance it goes quickly back the other way as well. So solid bounce for the moment. And as you can see, it certainly is sort of respecting the chart, with the buyers sort of stepping in exactly where they need to be. So interesting to sort of see where this goes for the next couple of weeks. But they're the two levels that I'm looking at now, 116 or back at test around that sort of 102, 103 levels. That's it from me.